United Nations World Heritage Sites, and nobody seems to care. They just seem to think that, well, we need to get rid of Bashar al-Assad and then Syria will be so much better. But they ignore the fact that Bashar al-Assad has kept together a patchwork of religions and cultures and philosophies together. And while Syria might not have been a country with a fantastic standard of living and so forth.
Sure, I mean, compared to Al-Qaeda, Assad is a philosopher king.
Yeah.
And expanding on that, Hillary said, I made a mistake in Libya, and they have these headlines saying, Libya now a failed state, hell on earth, thousands being killed a month, black Africans being targeted by jihadis, and they act like they screwed up. The plan was to destabilize it because Libya was uplifting all of Africa. It was creating an investment fund that actually was helping. So, I mean, you could say Gaddafi was a bad guy a long time ago, but he actually was starting to live more frugally and was giving almost all the money to the people. I'm not endorsing socialism, but he was actually doing it, and it was actually working in the public works he was putting in and the money he was giving to other countries. And now all of Africa is as you know, they admit, descending into hell, and Al-Qaeda forces are spreading all over the continent. I mean, and then AFRICOM says, oh, now we can come in to deal with the threat.
Yeah. I was talking about that on RT a couple of weeks ago with a guy from Cairo University who was an expert on Africa. And he and I agreed that this Boko Haram business is just another version of Al-Qaeda. It's another rebranding of the franchise of lunatics and crazies that allegedly espouse Islam. And we thought, both of us, that this is another way to destabilize that part of Africa because it was spreading beyond the original infection point to other countries nearby.
Simply amazing. The new book, Visas for Al-Qaeda. Where's the best place for people to find it? Amazon.com?
They can get it from Amazon.com. It's in Amazon in the U.S. and Amazon in Britain, France, and Germany as well.
People need to read this book and see the facts for themselves, especially now that all this is coming out. Say, see, we told you so.
And they can also get it as an ebook as well.
Well, that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and talk to Jeff in Georgia. Jeff, thanks for holding her on the air.
Thanks, Alex. Great to talk to you today. Great conversation, great guest. It would be great to have McAfee, him, Siebel Edmonds, Tosh Pumley all sitting at the same table and get some stories from that. Specifically, I called to ask his reaction when he saw this whole underwear bomber thing go down and the exposure by Kurt Haskell. Can't recall his name exactly, but the exposure of that and how the man was let on the plane and, again, signed off by CIA and allowed on board.
Well, basically, from what I understand, this underwear bomber somehow, he didn't really have the proper paperwork to get on the airplane. He didn't have a visa, I think.
That's right.
And he was shepherded through a security...
A sharp-dressed, well-spoken American man basically argued and ordered them to let him in. So knowing your background, who has enough power to order people to do that?
The United States government, TSA, the CIA, the State Department. We don't know. It was an Israeli company that was running the security at the airport. And it was, so strange that, somebody puts underwear, fills his underwear with explosives and tries to set them off on the airplane. That's more along the lines of the shoe bomber, where the guy tried to set fire to the shoe in the cabin. That all it does is create an opportunity for creating fear, on creating tighter alleged security theater, I think is a better word for it. I think basically it's absolute nonsense.
And then that makes everyone a suspect when it's the shoes, it's the belt, it's the shampoo.
Yeah. Or breast milk for women who are lactating.
No, that's who you got to watch. Can't trust anybody but the government and the big corporations that run it. Jeff, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then just to tie in that, well, we do know what the, who benefited from that, and that was Chertoff. As soon as he leaves the government, he goes to work for the company that had the body scanners all lined up and ready to go.
No, that's right. That's what I understand.
Simply amazing. Caller, we're going to jump. Thank you. Jerry, Gordon, Max, Stephen, and others. Your phone calls are coming up. I'm Alex Jones. We're talking to J. Michael Springman, an insider view, visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA handouts that rock the world. It looks like they're building up again for major events. Holder's gun ban targets veterans. I'm going to detail that article coming up. Military Bulletin labels Patriot groups militia. Domestic terrorists says they're about to attack on April 19th. That's what all these military drills are about. And then it's the right wing supporting the whole police state takeover. And meanwhile, they're being prepared to attack them. It's just hilarious if it wasn't so sick. Also, they're saying it's sexist if you don't want a overweight girlfriend. And that it's a conspiracy of the male patriarchy that we don't want that in the news. Paul Watson breaks it down. I don't know. I'm not into really skinny women. I'm going to be honest. I like voluptuous. I mean, I think everybody has different tastes. Some people are into 400-pound women. I mean, that's this is how this works. You can you can like what you want. I'm going to like what I like. I mean, in Turkey, I hear they like big women, or at least they used to. That's fine. You can have them. It's just that we're allowed to have our own views and our own taste, but that's coming up in the next hour. I want to do this segment in 5 more minutes with our guests, if he can stay with us, so we have enough time to take some of these calls. We have Mr. Springman, Visas for Al-Qaeda author, with us. Jerry in West Virginia, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, Alex and Mr. Springman. I just really am curious about the 28 pages that were unclassified and have yet to be released. I also lived in Saudi Arabia, and no one is aware of all the Americans and UKs that are locked up in the Saudi jails, that Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company, whom I worked for, doesn't do anything to help these American and Brits and other people that are there. And the stories can go on of the horrendous treatment of foreigners and expats living in Saudi Arabia.
But that's politically correct. I mean, they're allowed to because it's the right thing to do. Just like Mexico can torture our people, and that's okay. Do you have a question for Mr. Springman?
Yes, I want to know where the 28 pages are.
That's a great question. What do you make of all that and the people that have seen it and what they say, Mr. Springman?
Well, the thing of it is that the United States tends to overclassify a lot of things, but also at the same time, they will not let anything out that will make the government look bad, that will make a politician look bad, that will make a decision look bad. So I think the 28 pages are, A, either nothing, or B, it's a bombshell, and it shows the ties of the Saudis and maybe the Israelis and the American government officials to September 11th. And the only way to learn about it is to declassify the 28 pages.
Well, I've talked to Congressman Jones and others, and they say they've seen it. It's beyond that. It's stand down. It's that people were ordered to basically shut up and let it happen because they didn't want to, quote, embarrass Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, and I can see them holding the lid on and doing their damnedest to keep the truth from getting out.
What happens if it does come out that Saudi Arabia ran the attacks and that our own government stood down? That makes them complicit, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, indeed. And the United States is working with the Saudis to destabilize all the countries in the Middle East, most notably now in Yemen. It's the Saudis, with American advice and assistance and intelligence from NSA spies in the sky, to go and kill civilians in Yemen because they're the wrong brand of Islam, and because the Saudis want complete control of the Arabian Peninsula.
That's right. It's about Saudi Arabia setting up a globalist empire, and they're the muscle. Unbelievable. Jerry, great question. Thank you. One more call before we go to break. Max in Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Greetings, Alex. When Smitty was talking with you the other day supporting the Hillary corlocracy, he said that under Clinton we had 8 years of peace and whatever.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that when we come back. If Mr. Springman can do 5 more minutes. Can you do 5 more, sir?
Sure.
All right, we're going to go to break 70 seconds, come back and talk about that. I mean, look, both parties are a bunch of warmongers. I mean, one thing, we're fighting a war to defend somebody. We're fighting wars to destabilize. We'll be back. Stay with us. I'm not a diplomat like our guest, Michael Springman, but I have studied history because I find it fascinating. And up until about 1963 or so, the U.S. generally did try to build up countries. And if they did an overthrow, they tried to put in a better government and actually tried to build up the industry of the country to then make them an ally and a successful partner. It was still corrupt, picking winners and losers violating the doctrine of George Washington, even the Monroe Doctrine. But since then, it's degenerated until they're not even trying to overthrow countries to get somebody bad out. They want to degenerate Serbia, degenerate Syria, degenerate all these countries. They want to wreck them and then leave them wrecked. And that's not even good for business globally. So that's my view on it. Mr. Springman, what do you think's behind this? Then we'll talk to Stephen and others.
Well, I think your point is pretty much on the mark. They don't want a viable, functioning democracy or something close to a democracy with a healthy economy making life better and better for the inhabitants. They want to destabilize and destroy the countries because it gives them more effective control. They can move the CIA in. They can promise them the sun, moon, and stars with a rebuild of their economy using American contractors and American equipment and so forth. But basically, I think it's the rebuilding is more of a way of shifting money from one pocket to another pocket. That in Iraq, for example, they have all these horrible tales of corruption and money going missing, but nobody goes to jail for it. Nobody gets investigated. It's basically a big scam. Wreck the country, give us control of the various factions we've created to fight one another, and we'll promise you that you will have a much better country next year, except that doesn't happen. But in the meantime, money is exchanged, banks get rich.
It's a high-tech way to conquer countries.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the Roman Empire, divide and rule.
Wow. I agree with that. It's just a fact. Stephen in Michigan, you're on the air with our guest. Go ahead.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having me on. My question for your guest is, how can the mainstream media completely ignore all the evidence that 9/11 was an inside job?
That's a good question.
The mainstream media is run, in the United States at least, by maybe 4 or 5 large corporations. They don't want to offend advertisers. They're very close to the government, as Bob Perry noted in some of his books about how he was tossed out of the Associated Press. They want feel-good stories. They don't want to antagonize anybody that has any power. And they want to keep their good relations with the federal government.
And they've allowed corruption to totally take over now.
Exactly.
Good question, Steve. Thank you. Bob in Colorado, I think the last caller we have time for, then I'll go to Aaron after you leave us. Go ahead, Bob. You have any questions for Mr. Springman?
Yes, sir. The recently released ISIS video promises another 9/11. Now, we know 9/11 was an inside job, so I don't know what to make of that. I was just curious what your take is.
I mean, if I can give mine briefly, it's another inside job. If you let these groups build up, get armed, they're crazy jihadis, but you let them in. It's like putting a bunch of black widows in your neighbor's bed. You didn't make the black widows bite them. You just let them in to do it, or a bucket of rattlesnakes. So, Mr. Springman?
Well, basically, they like to keep the fear alive. And as Cheryl Bernard had said, she was a RAND analyst who was married to Zamek Khalilzad, who had been American ambassador to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to the United Nations. She said, we went out and we knew we couldn't beat the Soviets in any possible way, so we decided to collect and arm and train the most outrageous zealots, the most crazy fanatics we could find, and we turned them loose. And they killed everybody. They killed the moderates. They killed the progressives. They killed everybody who didn't agree with them. And you end up with this cadre of vicious extremists that have been turned into what I call the Arab-Afghan Legion that fights anywhere and everywhere the United States sees enemies.
Amazing. Mr. Springman, Godspeed. Thank you for your courage. We're going to be right back. Stay with us.